electronics. Take one, 2, 3.
We're going to be going over the replacement of a clutch on a single TT-2000 unit. The first thing you want to do is turn the machine off. You do that by pushing in the main safety switch. And it's also a good idea to turn off the internal power switch in case you happen to push that in, because that will turn the machine on. The next thing we want to do is slide the tray out towards you. And before we get to replacing the clutch, we'll go over a couple things as well. Anytime you do have a cutter or a ticket jam inside the guide assembly, 9 times out of 10 you can back the clutch off, spinning it towards you, and the tickets will come out of the guide assembly. If you do have to remove the guide assembly, simply remove the connector on the board, take the 2 red thumb screws off, and it's always a good idea to remove this board prior to taking the guide assembly out anytime you do need to remove it. And you can simply put the HO board or barcode board down there. To remove the guide assembly, best thing to do is hold on to the tray, take your 2 front fingers, pull it towards you, and lift it straight up. That removes the guide assembly. To remove the cutter assembly, you can just lift the chute cover, lift straight up, and then push back towards you. And if you ever are working on here, you can also lay the cutter assembly in here to prevent the chute from closing back down. I'm now going to put these parts back together, and we'll go over the replacement of the clutch on the single machine. If all you're doing is replacing the clutch, you do not need to take all of these parts apart prior to doing it. We find the best way of replacing a clutch is to simply remove the clutch cover using this is a number 8 socket head cap screw. You remove the clutch cover. You don't need to loosen it all the way. Just take the clutch cover off, put that down there. And now you want to drop the motor. You can do that simply by removing the 4 number 10 nuts. You want to take these all the way off. And try not to drop them. Then you can simply take the nuts and push, or the bolts, and push them straight down. You don't have to remove them all the way, just as long as they're down far enough where you'll be able to slide the motor base over. Now what you want to do is take a number 6 Allen and loosen the socket head screws on the clutch. Now you can simply take this, slide the motor over far enough, and then you can tilt it back, and now you can remove the clutch. And once the clutch is removed, you can take the new clutch, slide it back on, line the motor back up, push the bolts back through, and then you can put the nuts back on here. Put them on loosely at first, because you may need to make some adjustments. And you can also see where the marks are actually on the motor base themselves. That's where everything was lined up. You want to make sure everything's as square as possible. And before you tighten everything down, it's very important that the clutch slides smoothly across both shafts. If it does not slide smoothly across both shafts, that could be simply because the motor base is not lined up properly. So you just need to make sure that it is. If the clutch doesn't slide smoothly across both shafts, premature wear can occur. Once you have everything lined up properly, just tighten the nuts down for the motor base. And you just hand tighten them. There's no need to crank down on them overly. Once you tighten those back down, then your clutch is sliding smoothly across both shafts. It's also very important that the clutch gets pushed up against the spacer. That means everything's lined up. If you have it slid back here, What can happen is over the course of time it can separate the inside of the clutch. You do not want that to happen. Make sure you push that all the way over against that spacer. Then what you want to do is tighten down one side, and you'll notice that as you tighten it down, there's a gap between the top of the clamp and the bottom of the clamp. You want the gap on each side to be equal. It doesn't have to be exact, but you don't want one side over the other. And you can see how that side's equal to that side, and you want to do the same thing on this side as well. And again, hand tighten them, and then you want to just check to make sure the gap's okay, and you spin them, and that's basically the clutch replacement.